field research liaison for the Center for Environmental Farming Systems. John will be back for the next one. I encourage you to join us. The list of the webinars for the whole year are available on the SEF's website. So I'm going to jump in, and we're going to be talking about, our summer garden, common fruits and vegetables. We're going to talk a little about tomatoes, cucumbers, winter squash, and melons. Um, just interesting to note that in these four fruits listed here, we've got the Solanaceae family and the cucurbit family. There are only two families listed there. The other members of the Solanaceae family that we might grow in the summer would be bell peppers, um, hot peppers, or eggplant. So this is important to know what family your vegetables are in so that you can rotate your crops. Very important not to grow um, vegetables or fruits in the same family in the same spot year after year because you're just going to get a lot of disease pressure. So we're going to talk about trellising options. We're going to talk about pruning for disease control and for healthy plants. And then I'm going to touch on some common diseases and pests and point you to some really good resources. Before we start, I wanted to point out planting calendars, really valuable in planning your garden. The Cooperative Extension Planting Calendar is the most reliable resource for direct seeding, planting dates, planting spacing. It's available for the mountains and Piedmont and the coastal plain. This is what it looks like. So you'll have your vegetable over on the left, say snap beans, and it's going to tell you that, 50 to 50.5 days to harvest, which is important in garden planting. Maybe you want to reuse that space more than once in the summer. It'll tell you the distance between plants, and then it'll tell you when you can plant. So we're going to be planting our bush beans solely from seed, and we can plant beginning in March 15th all the way through September. So you can do a lot of succession planting for beans. So this is a really good resource, the Cooperative Extension Planting Guide. Let me hide these controls again so I can see. So I'm going to emphasize trellising for all our cucurbits. You can grow your cucurbits on the ground, but it's healthier for the fruit and the plant, and space-wise if we're trellising. So we're going to talk about trellising options for each of these. So like I said, we often get higher yields when we're trellising. You can grow a lot more per square foot if you're trellising. You could plant, cucumbers at the base of the trellis a foot apart, or squashes a foot apart, whereas if you're planting them traditionally in the ground, they need to be 4 feet apart. On a trellis, you're going to really decrease soil-borne fruit and foliar diseases. You're going to keep that vegetation off the ground. The fruits tend to be longer and straighter, and they're also easier to harvest. And you can walk around your garden. You're not going to be worried about stepping on the plant. It's also easier to look for um, squash bugs, etc. So we're going to start with cucumbers. Like everything I talk about today, they need full sun, a well-drained soil. They need warm soil to germinate, so you're gonna want to wait until April 15th to plant. Um, excuse me. They need medium nitrogen, but higher phosphorus and potassium. So you're gonna want to do a soil test. Submit your soil test to NCDA in the fall or the winter, so that you know what you're gonna need to grow. If you're gonna grow a garden, you want to think about how you're gonna fertilize it, whether it's compost or pelleted fertilizer or fertilizer that you mix in a watering can. You're gonna need some amendments to feed your plants. So the NCDA soil test will tell you what's already in your soil. It'll tell you your pH, which affects nutrient availability. Cucumbers have really shallow roots. You want to water evenly, like an inch of water a week. All the things I talk about today, ground watering either through a drip tape or a soaker hose, definitely most beneficial. These have lots of leafy vegetation, and in the southeast, in our hot, humid summers, we don't want that vegetation wet. So if you don't have drip tape or a soaker hose, you want to water really early in the morning so that everything dries out before it cools off at night. So for trellis plants, you can plant them as close as 12 inches apart. Cucumbers in general, 50 to 70 days to maturity. You can look at your seed packet. Um, and when they're 2 to 3 inches long, you cut them from the vine. Now, if you haven't grown cucumbers before, it's good to note that they're really prolific. Um, Cucumbers will, one cucumber vine will make a lot of cucumbers. We are going to prune our cucumbers that are growing on the trellis. After about 3 to 5 weeks, you can begin pruning. We're going to focus on a single main stem for vertical growth. We're going to start at the bottom of the plant and we're going to move up, pruning suckers at each node. Now, I've got a picture of this that I'll show you, but we're going to leave one sucker underneath the apical meristem, underneath our growing tip. We're going to leave that sucker in case something happens to the growing tip. So let's look at, this was a video that I thought was good to show you how to do it. It's the gardening channel. But this picture is also really helpful. So as you can see in this picture, we have a single main stem. That's our main stem. At each node, there's a node here, there's a node here. And at each node, you have a sunleaf, you have the climbing tendril, you have your fruits, and then you have this sucker, which wants to go off and become its own plant. But we don't want that to happen because then we just have this huge unmanageable mess. Um, you can see here that this sucker has just been nicked off with fingernails. This one's pretty big. You probably want to use some nice clean pruners. But we're going to take these suckers off, like I said, except for the one right under the growing tip, so that we can have airflow um, and minimize disease. Um, Also, as the plant grows, you can remove the lower leaves. The plant does not need them anymore, and you want to minimize that um, soil contact on vegetation because that's how a lot of soil diseases get spread. Here are some options for cucumber trellises. Um, I like this as a homemade tomato cage, a homemade cage. I think you might have a little trouble. My kids and I play hide and seek trying to find the cucumbers when it's growing because you have a lot of vegetation. So this one might be a little hard to get to the cucumber. This growing on a fence, existing fence, fabulous idea, nice and strong for the cucumber. This one looks great too. It looks big and strong. You want to make sure that you're um, pruning this one so that you continue to have good airflow here. This one's great. I like how it's a small space. There's shade for lettuce. They got lettuce growing underneath it. Really easy to find the cucumbers and harvest them, but it's too short. The plant is already growing over the top of it. So this is a great situation if it could be a little bit taller or maybe just extended horizontally. That's a great idea for cucumbers. You will want to attach your cucumber vine to the string, either with a zip tie or some string or these fancy little clips, especially if you're doing it vertically like this. This is a kind of setup I have only with bamboo, but the cucumbers easily, these strings are so close together, they're just going to jump strings all over, and you're going to have a really um, difficult time keeping the cucumber growing vertically. It's going to start growing onto each other. Anyway, I would put these strings farther apart and attach the cucumber vine to a particular string. I have this set up at home, but I have bamboo. I have a green tread-in post, and then a really tallest bamboo I could find attached to that tread-in, and then got up on a ladder and put a bamboo across the top, and then drop strings down, and that works well. Cucumbers, they'll get really tall. You need to have something tall. This doesn't look like it's necessarily very valuable at all. So bamboo is a great trellis, but you need to make sure that it's secured in the ground so it's tall and strong. So let's talk about another cucurbit now, winter squash. My absolute favorite, butternuts, kabochas, delicatas. It's called winter squash because it's harvested in the fall, but it grows all summer long. They're 80 to 100 days to maturity, so we're talking 3 to 4 months. Again, full sun, well-drained soil, compost rich if you can. Planted in late April. I always, I plant from seed. I have heard of some people transplanting squashes. They grow really well from seed. And then they grow all the way through the summer to the fall. All these varieties. We will prune our winter squash. Now again, you can grow squash traditionally on the ground, but you can also trellis it. Um, You will begin pruning the suckers when the first flowers appear. So, as I said before, the pruning for the cucurbits is very similar, but there are differences for each one to note. Um, and so this winter squash is a little bit different than the cucumber. But we are going to prune our lateral vines. Those are suckers. And then we're also going to pinch off the tip of the vine um, towards late summer so that we stop the vegetative growth and tell the plant, okay, now you need to ripen the fruit that's there. But let's look. I swear I talked about. Nope. Okay. Well, I'll talk about it here. Um, the lateral vines that are growing from the squash plant, that's where your fruit's going to set, and each vine can produce 3 to 4 squashes. And then you can remove suckers so you have a more manageable plant after that. And then you want to tip late summer, you want to tip it so it stops growing. You want to set the plant up for success. You don't want it to have too much to try to support. Um, so trellising options, this works really well. I've done this before. These are cattle panels attached to tread-in posts, so it's super strong. These butternut squashes, they don't really get too heavy. This plant's ready to harvest. You can see the vegetation has died back and ready to harvest the butternuts. Um, so this works really well for, I don't know. I've never tried to do kabocha trellising actually, but I know for acorns or butternuts or delicatas for sure, delicatas are small. A situation like this works really well. This is a cattle panel that's been folded over. You just want to make sure that it's really tightly attached to these tread-in posts because it does want to be straight. But it makes a nice little arch and it's easy to find the squashes. The plant's going to grow up to the top and then keep growing. It's not really going to grow down. So, a couple on each side will make a nice canopy. This is great for a patio garden. You can have one plant in each of these and grow it up the trellis. So it's really good for saving space. Excuse me. You can think about how much ground space something like this would take. Plus, you can really manage airflow when something's in a trellis. Muskmelons, a really interesting cultural note that I came across that I wanted to share. So, the original cantaloupe is named for a town in Rome, but it was introduced from Armenia. So, that's what they called a cantaloupe. That was the original cantaloupe. It has smooth, pale green skin. What we call a cantaloupe is a different variety, but both are called muskmelons. So, muskmelons are melons that have seeds within a cavity, right? So, honeydew, um, cantaloupes. Like watermelon is not a muskmelon because it doesn't have seeds within a cavity. So some of the common muskmelons that we see are honeydew, cantaloupe, chanterelle, canary or Persian melons, and bitter melons. The cucurbit as well. So a lot of similarities. We're going to see a lot of similarities. These are also, 80 to 100 days, much of the summer. There's a nice link here to Piedmont Master Gardeners, how to grow, melons at home. They like sandy soil. If you got a really rich clay, you're gonna want to mix in some compost. They need well-drained soil. They also need warm soil. You can start transplants or you can wait until the soil gets warm and plant seeds. If you're growing on a trellis, you can plant them a foot apart at the base of the trellis. If you're growing in the ground, you want to allow 3 to 4 feet between plants. Again, drip irrigation is best. Keep those leaves dry, keep the fruit dry. And then you'll know they're ready to harvest, both by the number of days that have passed and a color change from the melon, and it should easily separate from the vine. Now we prune the melons again for plant health, and this is a nice picture here at the node. She's pruning off these. You can call them a lateral vine or you can call them a sucker. We're going to leave the main vine untouched. This looks like a watermelon plant here. Um, so starting at the bottom, you can cut away these lateral vines, almost a third of the suckers, up to the fifth node, and then you're going to stop. So you're starting at the bottom and you're removing the suckers and leaves, but you're going to stop at the fourth or fifth node, and then you leave the remaining lateral vines to produce the fruit. And then again in late summer, They're going to tip the vines so that they stop vegetative growth and start ripening the fruit that they have. Um, right. So each vine can successfully nourish 3 to 6 melons. So once you've got the number of fruit that you want on each lateral vine, you can cut the tip off, like I said. Then you have a much more manageable plant. You have a lot of airflow. You can look for diseases and pests. If you're growing on a trellis and you've topped off the trellis, you can pinch that growing tip back. You can remove up to a third of the leaves, but you want to be selective. You want to make sure that you're protecting any fruit that's growing from the sun. You don't want sun scald on your melons, and you want enough leaves to support photosynthesis. If you get new flowers late in summer, you want to remove those. The plant does not need them, and you're not going to be able to grow any fruit from that late flower. I know this is a lot of information, but again, you'll get the recording and the slide deck if you like it. So the trellis options really are exactly the same as I talked about for the squash. These remesh panels are available at Lowe's. They're like a cattle panel, but they're smaller and more manageable. Um, cattle panels, bamboo, same idea as what we talked about with the squash, but they need to be supported. Um, these are full of water and so a lot heavier than the squashes that we looked at. And this is a really simple little pouch here. This is a clothespin and a washcloth. Just adding some support for the fruit so it doesn't rip off the vine. This is just tied to the fence. This is a more traditional sort of staking situation where you're gonna wind the lateral vines out on these strings, and just make sure that this is kept manageable so you get airflow in a situation like this. This one just trellising, I mean, pruning to make sure that you've got good airflow. Okay, I'm going to transition to tomatoes, but I wanted to talk about these two terms. Some of you might be aware of these two terms, but some of you may not. So you hear open pollinated seed and hybrid seed a lot. So the difference is that open pollinated seed means natural pollination, right? So insects and wind and birds transfer pollen from flower to flower. These seeds are called true to type, meaning that the offspring will resemble the parent and you can save this seed. These are often heirlooms, so the plants are adapted to local conditions. Um, so that's what open pollinated means. Now, hybrid seed means human intervention. It does not mean GMO. It means traditional plant breeding, cross-pollinating two varieties with a specific trait in mind. And usually that trait is disease resistance. So, especially in the Southeast where our summer disease pressure is so strong, cross-pollination, hybrid seed can have these disease packages. And you'll see, if you look them up online, you'll see, this tomato has strong resistance to powdery mildew, intermediate resistance to late blight and early blight, things like that. You can't save this seed because the offspring, you don't know what the offspring is going to look like, and they are more expensive. So these are seeds that you would find in a catalog, like Johnny's Selected Seeds or High Mowing. And it's worth checking out. I often go back and forth. For many years, I was just doing hybrid seed. The disease resistance is true. It does work. It's more expensive. We're talking like $5 for a packet of 10 seeds. But those tomatoes are going to survive. But you can't save the seed. So, last year I got all um, uh, Southern Seed Exchange. It's all open pollinated seed. Um, so it's up to you, but that's explaining those two terms, so you can make a more informed decision. So tomatoes, we have determinate tomatoes and we have indeterminate tomatoes. Our determinate tomatoes are these bush-like plants, and indeterminates grow all season long. Let me talk about the determinate seed tomatoes. So these are varieties that grow to a fixed mature size, 4 to 5 feet tall. They're bush varieties, and all the fruit ripens in a short period of time, like within 2 weeks. So these are often used for canning or putting up. If you're gonna want to save tomatoes, canned tomatoes, and you want something like determinate because then you can do that all at once. We don't typically prune determinate tomatoes. They do need support though, especially these heirloom varieties with these beautiful, huge fruits. They're going to set all their fruit, and then the bush is going to be very heavy and fall to the ground. So we've got our typical tomato cages. Those work well. These are, I really like this idea. It's tied to a stake, and you're going to want to support that plant along the stake at several places, especially at the top of the plant as the plant matures and gets all that heavy fruit. These are just different options. This has a cage around it. I worry a little bit about airflow with that, but depending on the number of tomatoes you're planting will determine what kind of support that you want to give the plant. These tomato cages are great. This is a little cheaper if you have a lot of tomatoes. Now, our indeterminate tomatoes are vining plants that continue to grow and extend in length throughout the growing season. So they're going to keep setting fruit and ripening fruit until frost kills the plant. We need to prune these tomatoes. We're going to pinch back suckers and we're going to remove bottom leaves to keep this plant healthy, to have a manageable plant. So here's a picture of our tomato plant. Again, we have this main stem, um, and then at each axle here we have a sucker. And so we're going to remove any root suckers. We're going to remove this sucker because again, that sucker wants to go off and be its own whole plant. So, it's definitely happened to me. You get behind on the suckers and you've got like just a ton of growth on a tomato plant, and it can become, if you have enough space, that's fine, but often you don't have enough space to deal with all these plants. So you're going to remove the suckers, but you're going to find this lowest fruit cluster, and then you're going to keep the sucker that's right under that. The sucker is the strongest one on the plant. We're going to keep it as a second stem and to bear fruit, but we're going to remove all the others. You could just pinch off this little sucker here. Yeah, you see how the suckers are within the leaf, this little um, joint here with the leaf. We don't want to remove the fruit clusters. Don't make that mistake of picking off your fruit. So the sucker is going to be associated with the leaf. Now, they're going to need trellising. If you have one or two, a tomato cage can work for the indeterminate. I like to plant a lot of tomatoes, and so Florida weave is, you can look up Florida weave. It's a where you have these strong tread-in posts, and then you have the tomato twine, and it is weaving in between each tomato in an attempt to keep them upright and away from their neighbor as they grow. So you're going to have like I don't know, at least every 12 inches string going down all the way up to the top. And it's really beneficial to put all that string in when you plant or before you plant, rather than trying to wrestle with a large plant and not hurt it. And it's 110 degrees in July. These tread-ins are expensive. I often put the big ones in the beginning and in the middle and the end, and then use smaller ones in between just because they're so expensive. This is much the same, but I like this. They've got some rebar running across the top. They've used a little PVC to run rebar across the top and then dropping lines down so that the plant can grow straight up the twine. You can attach the plant to the twine. That's the one real benefit from the Florida weave. I often find that the plants tend to lean into each other, and you end up doing a lot of tying to stakes and tying to the twine. Um, this option, if the plants are spaced far enough apart, I think you get a lot cleaner growth. As the tomato plant grows, you can remove the bottom leaves. The plant does not need them, and it keeps the vegetation off the soil. This is another example, homemade bamboo, but the line down from the top. Now you see this bamboo is firmly secured into the ground. That's important. But the plant has a nice rope to grow up. A little bit about common bacterial and fungal pathogens about what we've talked about today. Bacterial wilt, that's spread by the cucumber beetles. I'll show you a picture of them. Powdery mildew, really common in cucurbits in mid to late summer. Our old favorites, anthracnose and alternaria, leaf spot. These are the leaf that cause bacterial to cause the leaf spot. NC State Plant Pathology, these extension fact sheets. You can search all the publications. This link will take you to all the diseases that you might find on the summer vegetables that we've talked about. You can also search by crop. So say you have peppers and you've got, what is this disease on my peppers? You can see what could be happening to your peppers. Bacterial spot, Phytophthora, southern blight. You can search directly for anthracnose of peppers. Um, so the Extension Plant Pathology, the website is a great resource. There are also some cultural things you can do to exclude pests in your garden. There's a link here for the entomology cooperative extension. And then this link is to Growing Small Farms, which is Debbie Roos. She is the extension expert in Chatham County, and she's also a fantastic photographer. She's got the pollinator garden at Chatham Mills, um, in Pittsburgh, and beautiful pictures. Anyway, she's got a lot of great pictures of pests and pathogens on plants in the garden. We'll see aphids on the stems of our summer vegetables and fruits, or under the leaves. Aphids can be, a strong blast of water can knock aphids off of your plant. Cucumber beetles, squash vine borers, which um, the squash vine, the moth comes and lays its eggs at the base of the plant, and then the pupa emerges, and that's what bores into your squash vine. So you can put mound mulch around the stem um, to protect the moth can't lay eggs there. You can protect it that way. Squash bugs too, they're going to be laying eggs on the underside of the leaves. So floating row cover I mean, not for aphids, but floating row covers can keep out the cucumber beetles, the squash vine, moth from laying eggs, and squash bugs. You just need to be careful to remove it when you see flowers so that pollination can occur. So with the floating row cover, the plant is getting plenty of sunlight, especially if you have drip irrigation. You can just leave it on until you see flowers. But you can exclude these cucumber beetles here. We have our spotted cucumbers and striped cucumber beetle. Here is a picture of our squash bug and the squash eggs. So the squash eggs are going to be on the underside of all our cucurbits, and you can walk out. It's much easier if it's on a trellis. Turn over the leaf and just squash the squash bug eggs, right? You just rub them out. Um, it's really really sad when you go out, your squash is doing great. Winter squash for me in particular is doing great, and you walk out in the morning and it's covered in squash bugs because all these eggs have hatched. And then they transmit diseases and they're biting and chewing, and you lose your squash plant. Here's aphids on the bottom. Here's our squash vine borer. If you do have this, the squash plant can survive. It's an amazing. You can see where the squash vine borer is and go in and cut into the vine and extract it. And 9 times out of 10, the squash will survive. The problem is just if it ruins the vascular system and the plant wilts and dies. But here's our floating row cover. Not only does it keep out, children and deer and rabbits, but it also keeps out our pests, and it's also great frost protection. It can be really simple. I've got this, I've got PVC poles, and then I've got large binder clips that I secure it down with. This is really fancy. You can get these little hoops. You can see the drip tape running. If you don't have drip tape, then you will need to remove the row cover to water and let things dry out a little bit. I have a system like this, a PVC pole, and it's attached, with little C-clamps to the outside of the box. So I know we have plenty of time for questions without John here. I talk a lot faster than John does. But here is our emails. Questions anytime. John should be back at work in a couple of weeks, but you can direct any questions to me. And I think I will get out of the slide presentation so I can look at some questions. Oops, I don't want to go into that. Okay. There's the chat. Okay, I only see one question. Does anyone else have questions? So that's just from Lauren sending recording. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Um, I'll wait a minute to see if we have any. If not, I will let everybody go. If you do want the slide deck, send me an email. Is there better twine to use for tomatoes? Yes, there's something called tomato twine. And it's a nylon, it's synthetic. It doesn't sag like twine. Like brown twine string. So there's like, the white string and then there's the brown. I can't think, I'm blanking on the name of um the twine, but there is something called tomato twine. And it's really valuable to get. It often comes in a box and you can just unwind the twine. I can't find mine right now. I really need to find it. Do burpless cucumbers have a lower? I do not know much about burpless cucumbers. I'm sure something on the web would have that. Um, Sorry, I'm not familiar with the burpless cucumbers really. Can you take a flower question? It's about ranunculus, if not, no worries. Uh, you could try me, but I probably don't know. Okay. When do you plant ranunculus? Huh. I don't know. Why don't you email John? He's just sitting at home. Maybe he's an extension agent. Maybe he knows. Guards against the current drought. Yeah, it's hard. I would suggest drip tape. I would really suggest investing in some drip tape. It's highly efficient, uses less water. It's better for the plants. Um, if you can order stuff online, but Country Farm and Home in Pittsburgh is a wonderful resource for small farmers and backyard growers. And they can set you up with what you need. They have all the equipment. It's not complicated and it's not expensive. You need a garden hose, and then you need to buy what's called the header, which is like a main line with no holes in it. And you need just a little piece that will connect the garden hose to that, and you get a little punch, and you put some connectors in, and then you can run the drip tape all through your garden. But they can walk you through it and they can give you what you need. It's on Small Street in Pittsburgh. Um, Growing melons on ground in vines. Yes, you can lay directly on the mulch. The only difference, like that's good for disease control for sure. It's just a matter of space. So if you're growing melons on the ground, growing on mulch is a great idea. So it's keeping it off the soil. Can heavy mulch supply enough water to prevent? No, I do not think so. It gets really hot here in the summer. Um, you're going to need to water your melons or squash. You can use heavy mulch you can use less. Um, but who knows? Next month it could rain every day. The weather is just so unpredictable now. But right now, you need to be watering. If you've got things growing, you need to be watering it at least every couple of days. But I just go out and I turn on my spigot and I set my phone for 25 minutes so I don't forget and leave it on. And then I go out and turn it off. Is there anything we do about if you have a well? Yeah, that's hard. A rain barrel is also a good idea. I mean, it's not raining right now, but it's a good backup when we have a situation like this. Um, and we don't, if you have a well, you're worried about water. I totally get it. Um, yeah, I don't know. But mulch will definitely, you're mulching, you can use less water. Fertilizer, is wheat straw suitable for veggies or just tomatoes? Wheat straw's fine. You just want to make sure that it's a surface mulch, not incorporated into the soil because it's really high in carbon. But wheat straw is good. Um, yeah, tomatoes or any veggies, anything you can do to minimize leaf to soil contact is a great idea. For fertilizer, it depends on what I'm growing. When I'm growing my lettuce, I get the I don't have one in here container of fish fertilizer, any liquid. Neptune that you put a cap full in a watering can, and I use that for things like lettuce when I'm growing like tomatoes or depends on how many you have. The watering can is good, and that's like once every 2 weeks. But I will put down a little bit of organic pelletized fertilizer when I plant tomatoes or peppers, and then I will add a little bit more like mid-season. It's called side dressing. Should watering happen daily? Can it be skipped? Yes, it can be skipped. You just want to make sure that you don't need to water every day. Right now in this drought, and when I have things growing, I'm watering like every 2.5 days, or 2 days. But it's better to water for a long time every 2 to 3 days than to water really short every day. You'd be surprised if you water something for 5 minutes and then just move some soil and you've barely penetrated the soil. So especially on drip, turn it on for a half an hour every 2 to 3 days and you'll get a really good watering. Every 3 days, if you're, worried about water. A lot of them, they say you want to have an inch of water a week. Um, and the drip tapes, they emit different amounts of water. If you really want to get technical, like if you're market gardening, you want to make sure you're getting the right amount of water. You can look at the size of your emitter on your drip tape so you know that you're getting enough and how long you need to water. So if you have a school gardens, yeah, I mean, they don't need to be watered on the weekend. You can water them on Friday, you can water them on Monday without drip. How long? It's hard in the middle of the summer, with a hose. It's like I said, you'd be surprised how long it takes to have water infiltrate down into the soil profile. Definitely something like the soaker up better than the shower. Um, uh, but soaker hoses are also very easy. Soaker hoses are cheap, and the difference with the soaker hose is it's just sort of emits water all over, all along it. Rather, with a drip tape, you plant like if a drip tape has an emitter or a little hole every 12 inches, you plant the tomato every 12 inches so that your plant is directly at the water source. A soaker just emits water all along the hose, but it's also good and cheaper. So it's really just hooking something up to your own garden hose and then having it snake through the garden. I don't know about compost tea. That's a specialty that I do not know about. Um, okay. So if you just have a hose, I would encourage you to go out and water and then use your finger to move some of the soil and see how deep the water is getting. And then you can gauge. But definitely the soaker option is better. Okay. Well, we have more time. I'm going to give it just a minute. If you have to leave, thank you so much for joining us. If you want to stay on and chat about something, I'm happy to stay on for a while. But if not, enjoy your summer. Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Lauren, how many people do we have left?
There's 11 people still.
Okay. Yeah. I encourage you guys to look at some seed catalogs. It's really interesting the different varieties that you can choose. And days to maturity has a lot to do with it too. We always seem to take a vacation in the middle of the summer, right when my tomatoes are ready to harvest. So knowing the days to maturity of your tomato can inform when you plant the tomato, so that you're there when it's harvested. Another thing I want to say is that I have noticed lately that delaying my tomato planting is really beneficial. If I delay until like the end of May, I seem to miss a lot of the early disease pressure.
Hmm.
And now things are so warm. My tomatoes are harvest or ripening and ready to pick in September, rather than July. You can also double crop tomatoes. You can plant in April, and then you can plant tomatoes and peppers again in August for a fall harvest.
What? No
Yeah.
way. I have not experienced that.
Yeah. I've had a lot of luck delaying. I mean, I'm not delaying on purpose, right? I'm just always
Yeah.
late in planting. But then I was like, oh, well, I missed a lot of the disease. It worked out great. So,
Yeah, I guess that's true. I feel like I used to work at the agroecology farm
oh yeah,
for NC State, and last year we transplanted some tomatoes, I think at the end of May, and we were harvesting them like through the fall school year.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The disease pressure really tapers off. Um,
Yeah, definitely. We did have to go in and like cut off basically the entire bottom half of the plant, um,
oh yeah,
just
yeah. You can
because
remove all
the
that lower
disease.
stuff for sure.
Yeah, it definitely delayed the disease from spreading, which was good, but
Yeah,
I was like, goodness gracious.
tomatoes are yummy, but they're a lot of work.
There's so much work, but they're my
Yeah,
favorite thing to grow. So,
are they? Yeah. My favorite thing to grow is winter squash, like red curry.
mm.
But it just
Mhm.
breaks my heart because I always end up losing it. Like it never, it'll look great, it'll look great, it'll look great, and then it's like dead.
Yeah.
Um, all right. Well, I think we can let everyone go.